It is good to see you today, Harry. You are the CEO and co founder of Tonk. You describe Tonk as a way for regular people to build their little internets. So let's just start there. What does that mean?
Oh yeah. So I think my massive bugbear with most activity in the ecosystem is that we don't think about users enough and we don't think about regular people enough. And to me, the innovation is the most exciting thing, and solving problems in people's lives is the most exciting thing. And so when I kind of shut my eyes and try and work on our copy and our story as kind of the front man of Tonk, I try and imagine like my dad in front of me or my partner in front of me or some of my partner's friends who like aren't in the tech world, and it's very uncomfortable because it forces me to let go of words like zk and blockchain and web3 and platform overhead and just explain to people in their own terms why we think what we're doing is exciting and why the internet is going to be okay, rather than a big fireball, a big raging inferno. And when it comes to how we want people to feel when they're using Tonk, or when they're using products built with Tonk, we want the internet to feel little again, in the sense that you, as the human being, have agency, and you're using the internet as a tool to interact with other human beings, rather than being trapped within an endless doom scroll, rather than being trapped within a system that you're economically dependent on and that someone else essentially controls. When we say Tonk helps you build a little internet, that's what we mean. Now, for anyone who's curious to learn more, what actually is Tonk? What does that actually mean? It's really simple. It's two things. It's a co-pilot friendly framework and a network for building personal software on interoperable, decentralized private data stores. And so the people that we're helping and we're trying to champion are people who are building personal software for themselves, for their friends, for their communities, for their colleagues. And we help them build that in a way that doesn't increase your dependence on a platform, that keeps your information private and close to you, and that guarantees that you can remix and play and interoperate with your data however you
Mhm.
may want to in the future.
And so you're doing this, you're allowing people to build those small applications for their own needs without going through a platform. Have you seen some of those applications, or do you have some examples of those applications for those of us who are curious watching this
Yeah,
episode
so
of?
many. Maybe the best way is to like explain the story of how we got here. So,
Hmm.
without giving the whole backstory of Tonk, Tonk's essentially been building in applied cryptography for about 2.5 years, and for much of that time, we've kind of been like a skunk works, pumping out experiments and prototypes of games built with ZK and research on NPC and little ZK Nintendo emulators and social experiences. And over time, what we noticed at the same time we transitioned from being a more of a skunk work into being a very product focused startup is that there was a behavior change in the world.
Hmm.
And this has happened in the last 4 months. And the behavior change in the world that we've seen is that more people are just building more of their own stuff. And we noticed it in ourselves, and we noticed it in our friends, and we noticed it in just people we meet. People are building, a really simple example is people are building like their own ways for AIs to coach them based on their notes,
Yeah.
or people are building personal meditation trackers. Someone we met was building a little tool for calculating the quantity of sourdough starter he'd need to use and how much water and yeast to add to it to like bake bread. And it's called bread.calculator and it exists on the internet. And he just built it for
Yeah.
himself. And we could see all these people were building stuff for themselves. And the reason they were doing all this stuff is because the world's changed, because we can vibe code now, because we have AI, we can just build more of our own stuff faster. You can build games in an evening. You can build your own to-do manager in like an hour, and it can be more
Hmm.
personal and more special for your needs than anything like Emotion or Todoist or Apple To Do could make for you over the course of a year. But that comes with a new problem, which is that people want to play with their data. They want to build personal software, but they want to be able to play with their data in a way that they have more control over. They
Yeah.
don't want to be bombarded by surprise fees or feature creep. They want to guarantee that they're going to be able to plug it into whatever they want to plug it into. And they want to make sure they're not giving up all of their data. They want to feel independent. They want to feel private and
Hmm.
independent. and like guaranteed flexibility over time. And so that's the kind of person that we're looking to help and like
Mhm.
simplify their life. Because as it turns out, if you wanted to do anything relatively ambitious with your own personal software, it turns out you need to hike in all this extra stuff, like to manage your state and to manage your application. And like a really simple example is I was in Denver and I was in a restaurant meeting one of our investors and we had dinner. And then outside the restaurant, we bumped into this guy, as you do at like a crypto conference. And he was showing us this little app he'd built that auto replies to all of his Telegram messages and all of his WhatsApp
Yeah.
messages and all of his emails, or at least it just like, drafts replies for him. And then it gives him like a
Oh.
nice unified interface. It took him like, I don't know, less than a day to build it because he just used Cursor. But he had this problem, which was like, I'm using everything with Postgres. I've got to handle all these migrations. I've got to handle all these like caching. How does it work across my devices? How do I do the authentication? And I think one of the things we realized is that if you wanted to make life as simple and easy for this person as possible, for the person making the bread app, for the person making their personal financial planner, for the
Yeah.
person making their like wedding planner, we need a new kind of way to store information and to read information and to synchronize information. And that's where we were like, oh, perfect. This is where all of our insights from building applied cryptography over the last 2 years are going to come together. And we can build a stack that just makes this super, super nice for everyone building personal software. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. If we look at your history, so you started with on-chain gaming and then you moved to Speakeasy, which was more about building groups of friends with gated access based on attributes that could be proven through cryptography, including zero knowledge proofs. That's pretty much how you met. And now moving to this, where it's not that much about building groups or choosing which information you disclose, but more knowing where the information goes and not just entrusting ChatGPT or whatever with all your data, but having your own platform that is built for you, your own container.
Yeah, so the journey for us from the inside has felt like very cumulative and very organic and very linear. And the same motivation for why we're building the Tonk stack now is the same that got us interested in chasing down Speakeasy, chasing down Autonomous Worlds,
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that as well. The thread through the whole thing has always been the same, which is that the internet isn't yet finished. We have this massive thing called platform overhead that imposes cost and inconvenience on businesses and on people using the web. But there's a whole bucket of very exciting and very nascent frontier decentralized technologies, including but not limited to blockchain, but also including
Mm-hmm.
programmable cryptography, also including like sync engines. All of these, you have this nice toolkit and you have all these problems to do with the internet, and they're going to come together in a really exciting way to create a new kind of internet that feels much more, that feels cheaper, more convenient, but also feels more liberated for individual
Yeah.
human beings and individual businesses. And the thing that I never got into blockchain through the crypto route. I never got into blockchain through like the money route. The reason I got interested in blockchain was because I was interested in decentralization on the web more generally. And to tell that story, it helps to just helps to go back to give a little bit more background on me. So I guess context on me is that when I was growing up, I never had a real aspiration to get into like the tech world. I just
Mm-hmm.
wanted to create cool stuff. And I spent most of my time doing theatery things. And it was only when I was in my third year of university that I looked around and I realized that, whoa, the world is changing a lot and it's being driven by the technological basis of society. And that technological basis is changing so fast and is being built by teenagers over in a valley on the other side of the world. And I actually decided to put all of the arts to one side. My co-founder had a relatively similar experience between the arts and technology and decided to learn to code and to get into tech and work for startups and start my own. And after
Mm-hmm.
about kind of 5 years of being in the tech world, it's pretty easy to come up with I feel like a lot of people come up with the same philosophy about how the web could be better. I was working for an amazing company that made Fortnite called Epic Games with an awesome CEO called Tim Sweeney. And there were two big things happening at Epic that really shaped what I believe about the world and what I believe about innovation. And the first is that my CTO was teaching me all this really great stuff about the history of the web and protocols and how you have these great men and women who kind of live in the middle of Arizona somewhere and they're like members of their local internet engineering task force meetup. And they're basically responsible for the protocols that power the internet. But it just struck me how there was no like HTTP company and there's no internet company. It's like a shared protocol that we're using. And at the same
Mhm.
time, Epic was fighting a battle in the courts against Apple and Google for alleged monopolization of the app stores and the take rates that they were forcing on things like Fortnite.
Yeah.
And and so it kind of came together for me, and I realized, like, whoa, the internet has been a very platform heavy part of the cycle, but protocols are this really exciting thing as a way of building not just a more liberated experience for that diminishes platform risk and diminishes take rates, but also just creates bigger markets as well. When you kind of reduce individual corporate control of a market and get everyone sharing and building more of a bazaar than a cathedral, to borrow a
Mhm.
metaphor used to describe the growth of Linux. At the same time, the second thing that was happening at Epic was I was in charge of a product that would have been great to decentralize if the technology was there. So my job at Epic was to work on the child safety part of the organization. A lot of kids in Fortnite, that imposes a responsibility on the company to make sure that we're being responsible and obeying the law. There's a really funny part of Silicon Valley, the TV show, where they accidentally start hoarding kids' data, and in the US, you get enormous fines under this ruling called COPPA, where you literally can pay hundreds of millions of dollars to the
Yeah.
FTC unless you're properly custodying that data. It turns out the best way to keep kids safe when they play Fortnite is to figure out who the parent is and make sure the parent is the one in control of the kid's experience. And that imposes a challenge for us as a team, which was like, how do we tell who is or is not a parent? You know, rather than an older sibling, or rather than like the kid pretending to be a parent. And my job was to be the product manager on the parent verification team and try and distinguish who was and was not a parent. And it was bizarre because we didn't want to own like the list of all the parents in the world. And we knew Google and Facebook and Microsoft all had the same problem with their gaming
Mhm.
divisions. It would have been so much easier and better to like share these lists of parents somehow. And also not even just share them, but just not even like custody them in the first place. Like at the end of the day, this was imposing all this extra cost on us that manifested from like the inherently centralized nature in which identity is managed on the internet. And I got really into decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials. And I, back in 2021, 2022, I was joining the W3C's calls on
Yeah.
finding a new standards for verifiable credentials. And for those of you who know the history, listening to the podcast, they'll know that verifiable credentials are kind of like proto ZKID. They're like ZKID V0. And it was through that that I got interested in ZK as cutting edge technology that made decentralized approaches to identity management more feasible. And it was through that that I also got introduced to the idea of blockchain, which I'd always kind of understood more of a like a money thing. I'd never really thought of more as like a world computer thing. And
Yeah.
so because we were coming in, I met my co-founder at this incubator Entrepreneur First, which is the same one that Aztec started at and also Jensen started at. So they've got a good pedigree when it comes to decentralized projects. I met my co-founder at Entrepreneur First, and we had this real meeting of the minds and meeting of the soul as well. We really, really adore each other, and we're very, very mission aligned. And what we noticed was that there's this really exciting thing called ZK, but also programmable cryptography more generally. And all the work was being poured into making the money machine go faster. And what was so interesting to us, I think the partner I work with closely, our lead investor, he estimated maybe over $500 million has been given to ZK teams. But the
Yeah.
vast majority of that has been given to underlying research to speed up the protocols, to like make more efficient, more secure. But relatively little money has been given to teams that want to push the application space and actually discover like what could this technology be for. And coming from my experience at Epic, I just had this intuition that there's going to be something so exciting here. And so we built all these games and we built social experiences like Speakeasy, which is really like supposed to be a matching engine that can index on your whole digital footprint rather than the limits of any one platform. And we built stuff for on-chain games. And the thing that was so exciting to us about on-chain games and autonomous worlds was the fact that here you had a bunch of really creative people building software in a composable way on top of each other and it was permissionlessly composable in a way that only Ethereum can really deliver. And that meant that the barrier to innovation was very, very, very low because anyone with a
Yeah.
good idea can kind of come up with it. And we're quite inspired by like what happened with the Curve Wars and with Nouns DAO and with Constitution DAO. And we could see all these new forms of social coordination happening. But we could also see that the story here was so much bigger than that. After a couple of years of basically accruing technical insights and accruing user insights and getting better at a feel for building and launching, I resolved at Christmas time for the Tonk project. One of the resolutions for 2025 would be that we would just be unbelievably user focused and just obsessed with users and their problems. And that led us to the path we're on today, where we find this very, very niche set of people, and we can see how they need cryptography in order to do the thing that they want to do. And we feel pretty confident that we're one of the few teams in the world that can deliver that. And so, yeah, that's who I'm obsessed with in March 2025. And we really see it as like our wedge to build, to like achieve this dream of starting a network of interoperable data stores that is self-sovereign and private and interoperable and will be like the natural place to build any kind of information service on this
Mhm.
new internet.
Thank you. When you say personal and interoperable, do you mean interoperable between people as well, or do you mean I have my own different containers of nodes which operate between them, which communicate between them, and then maybe I can make my model usable by someone else with their own data?
Yeah, I kind of think it's really, really simple. It's kind of like food. Like someone's throwing a dinner party and you bring a cake and then you eat the cake together. Maybe you go around to someone's house in the afternoon and you use some of their eggs to bake your cake.
Oh,
Uh, and it's all in your kitchen and there's no like Mark Zuckerberg standing over your shoulder asking you about the cake you're trying to bake. You're just baking your cake. And that's great. I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg doesn't want to look over your shoulder either. I'm sure that if he had better technology available to him, you wouldn't want to be there either. So I think like try to dream out into the future. I think it's there are all sorts of architectural questions around. Is this going to be like Urbit? Is this going to be like Blue Sky? Is this going to be like Ethereum?
mm,
Is this going to be like some kind of like superpowered database or selection of databases? I think it's really simple. I think any application is going to be able to read data from any other application if the user permits.
yeah.
And it should be as simple as just calling like user dot address or user dot favorite film, and the user will just have their data, and the data will be a relatively unified blob that follows the user around the internet and feels like their own. And services and apps ephemerally spin up. They come in, they play with your data if you let them, and then they leave, and then your data stays where it is.
Mhm.
And so you get a decoupling of applications and services from the underlying information that they rely on. And that is good for everyone. That's the dream. And there's just so many smart people building in that direction. And there's so many people who
Yeah.
recognize the value of that new way of building. And yeah, that's what we're so excited to be chasing.
Okay. Do you think that's gonna happen soon in general? So we've seen this gigantic unlock in the past few months or maybe past year in the whole building your hyper customized apps without needing to be a genius developer with perfect understanding of how computers work. Why isn't it already the case? What opened that, and when will we see all those apps on all our devices everywhere all the time?
Yeah, this is the question I enjoy answering the most because I think people have this feeling of like, look, we've heard it all before.
Uh-huh.
You're going to tell us it's all going to be open and interoperable. But, I was there at the start with Urbit and now I'm jaded. And now I'm unhappy. And stop giving me hope, man. You're gonna lead me down a toxic path. It is genuinely different this time. I understand the response, but it is genuinely different this time. And it's different this time really for two reasons. The first reason is that the technology has changed.
Mm-hmm.
And the second reason is that the market has changed. So how has the technology changed? The technology's changed really in two kinds of ways. The first is that because everyone can vibe code now, this dream of malleable software, which has been around since like the 80s and 90s, like even back to Xerox PARC, decades and decades and decades ago, and Alan Kay, even like Apple HyperCard, Squarespace. Microsoft Excel to an extent, these are all basically driving at the same thing, which is like, how do you make it possible for regular people to just build their computational environment rather than having to buy the one that's given to them from the supermarket? And AI just changes that. It turns out that
Yeah.
English is the hottest new programming language, and now now people like me who are terrible at coding can build personal software. But in the next year, if AI keeps advancing in the way that it does, my dad will be able to do the same. And he'll just speak to his phone for 10 minutes and he'll say, "Look, I need you to make me a version of WhatsApp that integrates with my personal trainer's calendar and sends him my like blood pressure on like a weekly basis. Can you do that,
Mm.
please?" And the phone will go, "Yes." If the AI keeps compounding, which I think there's good reason to bet that it will. The second thing is that this dream of like Urbit, AT protocol, Ethereum, these decentralized protocols, the technology has just gotten a lot better for how you actually make them work at scale and how you solve certain scaling problems. So basically, because of the crypto industry, so much of this money has been poured into programmable cryptography, and now you can
Mm.
literally do things that you weren't able to do before. Like one of the problems with Urbit, for example, is Urbit's not really multiplayer. Like you have all these different islands and all these different planets. They don't really speak to each other. And if you want to use a service that will tell you how to surf around the different worlds of Urbit, that service will have to be in like a Web two like platform. And that's changed now. There are ways to create virtual servers or create virtual server like experiences between different servers without actually involving a third party with things like multi party computation. And so and so the technology has changed a lot. It's fueling the demand and it's also fueling the supply of protocols that can meet that demand. The second thing that's changed is that the internet has changed itself. So people are 1,000 times more literate than they were 20 years ago about conscientiously choosing what sorts of information services they use. I can't remember whether it's Nike or Adidas or whoever, but one of them has got this big contract in place which says that if you want to work with us, we need independence from Amazon Web Services because it's just too much platform risk for us as a company. And we've seen what happened to Vinga and Facebook, but
Mm.
also individual creators are having this as well. Like a lot of my partner's friends work in the music industry, and some of them actually, there's one very inspirational example, a lady called Kate. She's quite very successful singer here in the UK and indeed worldwide. And she has started an OnlyFans to, where she sells pictures of her bum because she needs the money. And
Mm.
she's an internationally famous pop star. And she's kind of being screwed a bit by like the platforms and by the take rates. And she's doing it as like an amazing like political statement to say like this is
Mm.
what we're being forced to do. And so I think in a world where like blue sky usage is like surging and truth even it's not a political thing, like truth social usage is also surging. And where crypto is surging, I think people like the world's changed and people are just waking up to
Yeah.
the need to keep their digital world more indie and more private.
Yeah, and yeah, obviously that comes back to your small internets where everyone is going to have
Hmm.
not just this idea maybe of this cozy web where it's going to be like, oh, it's going to be group chats with the people I like, which it's comfy, but there's no discovery, there's no getting out of your comfort zone, there's no discovering new stuff and new people, and it's not.
Hmm.
It's the solution. The solution is just eight, many billion internets, um, where everyone is going to have their own, but also be in 150 others, and everyone's going to take all these pieces and turn them into their own experience instead of just logging into Facebook and being like, yep, this is my society.
Who knows exactly what it's going to look like? But I think the vibe coding thing is really significant because it's a platform shift. And every
Mm.
time there's a platform shift, everyone's built up advantage goes away. Like, I'm actually skeptical of the idea that Google has that much more of an advantage over Tonk in building in this new world because relative to this new world, like no one has an advantage. It's like space. It's like the moon. No one knows what's going to happen, and we're going to see the weirdest stuff over the next few years. And that means
Yeah.
it's a chance to hit the reset button. And so I think when it comes to how people create educational content, how people curate their infosphere and send funny videos of cats to their friends, when it comes to how enterprises build businesses on top of their own data, on top of other people's data, when it comes to how individuals manage their health and their projects and their to-do planners, when it comes to like how we create tools and games and events for our friends, I think what's going to happen is everyone is going to have the tools of creation. And it just opens up this question of like, where's the state going to live? Like,
Mm.
there's like three outcomes. Either the state is going to live in everyone's like individual bucket and it's not going to talk to each other, bad, because state is only valuable when it can contextualize itself relative to other state. And when my dad's gym app can speak to his blood pressure app, can speak to his whatever, the second outcome is that we genuinely all live under the sovereignty of Google Gemini, and everything in your Google Drive will be able to speak to each other seamlessly. But there's
Mm.
this problem which makes that very, very hard of this idea of like centralized control and centralized interoperability, which is what happens when your Apple ecosystem needs to talk to your Google ecosystem, needs to talk to your Notion ecosystem, needs to talk to your like little mini indie health app. Like it reminds me of the 1990s when AOL and Yahoo and Microsoft were like, oh, the internet seems big. Maybe we could own it. Like, it doesn't work. The public
Yeah.
network effect is stronger than the private network effect, or at least that's the bet that we're taking. And and so what will happen is that, or the bet that we're taking of what will happen is that a maximally interoperable way for any data living anywhere to be able to be fruitful and productive with any other bit of data and any other service coming in from anywhere without caring what ecosystem you're from, that's going to be like an unbelievably strong network effect. And I think while we're focused today on like this niche of, okay, we're going to build for the cypherpunks and we're going to build for these like indie devs, I think it's not going to be very long until just the pure value of all the data intermingling is going to be so obvious that as the natural home in which to build your business and to build your application and to live in your internet space, I think the network effect we get from that, which we don't want to own, by the way, which we want like everyone to own, is very, very strong indeed. And so I think this time really is different. And that's why, Tim Berners-Lee, he started posting again about Solid. He started posting in the last few months because he can see the same thing that we can see, which is
Yeah.
that he's had this project for interoperable data stores since forever, Solid, and he's bringing it back because the world's changed. And I think that's why it's so exciting and
Yeah.
why I'm optimistic of the future.
Coming back to the market side of, we know there are new technological affordances that allow us to completely change the world as we see it now on the internet. On the market side, on the demand side, you're talking about Blue Sky, you're talking about Solid. What are the other hints that make you think, yeah, this isn't just, oh, it's possible to do, but there's also real demand to have this customizable internet?
I was like lying on the sofa on Sunday, like exhausted, and I open up my phone, and some dude in like the Rockies has built an app with Tonk. Like this is we sent out this library, like we open source our library like last week. People we don't know are already building with it, and he recorded like a 7-minute video of him
Uh-huh.
using it, his feedback. He showed us the little tool he used for watering his plants. He sent it around to all of his buddies. People are already desperately trying to look for this stuff. So this is very much not us like dreaming out into the future. This is us like really grounded in today. What do people actually want to do? We had someone drop into the group chat yesterday, and they built a to-do planner. We had someone drop in, and they were like, "How could I use this to not use iCloud, but use it as a way to share my photos with other people?" And so, if people stop saying they want it, we'll go and do something else.
It's just this thing that we're starting to see more and more of. Everyone, we're used in the world that we live in today. I think we're getting more and more used to customizing, every hyper customization
Mhm.
in general. We've seen it everywhere except on the internet, where somehow things have consolidated instead of becoming more customized, instead of having our geocities. And yeah, we're coming back really to the state that it really always should have been of, why do we have a super detailed menu everywhere except on this one device that we use all day long for everything we do?
I get really sad about, there was this time in the 2010s
Mm.
where people were coming up with all sorts of bonkers ideas. What if we had Uber for pets? What if we had Spotify, but it was like for pictures of the horizon I can see from my bedroom every day. And we just basically had this long, long tail of bad ideas that only mattered to a small number of people. And if you applied to Y Combinator, they'd be like, there's no market for this. What are you talking about? And if you went
But
to your
they
product
matter.
manager as a yeah,
It's
right.
what you
But
said. They
but
matter to a
but
small number of people.
exactly. And so there's this like long tail of all the problems that were too trivial for the Google Maps product manager to prioritize on the Google Maps product roadmap. And as the cost of software is just going to zero, and it will continue to do so over the next year, all the dumb stuff that was too dumb to build in the last like 15 years, we're going to see it all. I'm so excited. And I think we've got a real chance. Tonk building a stack that makes it just unbelievably easy for all these people to build little niche fun things for
Yeah.
their friends and their family and their colleagues and their communities and whoever.
Outside of being aware that Tonk exists, do
Yeah.
you see anything holding back innovation right now?
Yeah, I think fear is holding back innovation. And I think fear in the sense of every developer I've spoken to in the last, I don't know, 2 months, can, especially in crypto, or who've been building in kind of ZK or crypto related stuff, they're all kind of sad. And they're all kind of sad because they feel like, oh, crypto used to be like a big party 3 or 4 years ago, DeFi summer, composable, nouns, all this random stuff was happening. But now it feels like the party's in AI and my skills useless. Like, what have I been doing? Now I have to build casino meme coins, but I don't want to build casino meme coins. I want to build cool stuff. And I think the thing I would just want to say to everyone is like, no one is an expert in anything. There is no such thing as like sunk cost in your expertise or the skills that you've built up. Like robots, artificial intelligence, space, 3D printing, decentralized networks. There's so much. It's like a green field of possibility. And although it can be easy to think that some people are further ahead, some people are further behind, relative to the size of the space, we're all stupid. And I mean all of us, like literally every single one of us. BlackRock, Sam Altman, Sundar, we're all beginners in this brave new world. And I think we all have a chance to create awesome things that solve problems for regular human beings. And I think I think we have a chance to do Web3 in a way that is cool and is rooted in human beings rather than rooted in like imaginary problems. I think we have a chance to build. I think we have a chance to build, and I think that's scary, but I think it's awesome.
That one question, because in my mind I see the link with small internets, but it might be only in my mind. But you chose to be based in London, right?
Yeah,
And
it's pure path dependency. I
okay,
met my co-founder here. He had just
okay.
moved his. It's not like a good reason, it's a dumb reason. But I will say a smart thing about the path dependency, which is that there was like a moment when Bill Gates was thinking, where do I build this office for this thing
Uh-huh.
called Microsoft? And he knew that Silicon Valley, which had been going for decades and decades and decades, Intel, HP, well, he knew that was like the obvious choice and to go pitch up in San Francisco or pitch up in Palo Alto or wherever. And he consciously decided not to do that. I think he chose somewhere first and then he chose to go to Seattle.
Yeah.
And the point was that I think this is really important for crypto. The social innovation ecosystem can, after a while, constrain your imagination and constrain your productivity for building products that users love. And someone else who realized this a few decades later was Jeff Bezos, and that's why he didn't want to build Amazon in San Francisco or the Bay either. And so I think there is a strategic advantage to being here in London, which is that it's a very international city. It's kind of like the most similar place to New York, other than New York in the world, I would say. And that gives us all the stimulus we need and all the access that we need. But it also just lets us focus on the thing that matters, which is the user, rather than, oh, what's the dinner party I'm going to? Have I been invited to Sequoia's offices this week? Oh, was I seen with the right person in the right place? Like, I don't care. I care about the user. I care about the technology that improves their life. And so, yeah, there you go.
And I have one final question before moving to conclusion, which is last summer, you were with us at Trust Infrastructure Day, which was held at ECC. And you're one of the main people I saw who wrote about trust infrastructure in the first place. And I feel like Tonk is such an obvious extension of trust infrastructure as a concept. And I wanted to know what does trust infrastructure mean to you today? What did it mean to you when you first wrote about it, if that has changed in the meantime? I don't know. And how do you link Tonk to that?
Yeah, I think trust infrastructure is like an amorphous thing. It can mean like lots of different things to different people. I think it predates what I wrote about it. I think it predates what Arno wrote about it. Trust infrastructure, I think the best way to explain it is it's a set of ideas that really try and do two things. They try and show how a lot of the advanced decentralization technology that we've developed, so this spun out of crypto and other places over the last 5 years, can be a way to change and improve how human beings interact socially and how they coordinate in the world. I like to think about this as like you can imagine the set of all the problems in the world. Like imagine there's a big bucket of all the problems in the world, and then you cut out all the problems that markets are really, really good at solving. And then you cut out all the problems that governments are really, really good at solving. And then you take what's left. These are the things that governments nor markets are good at solving. And they are things to do with coordination. They tend to be moving very fast in a way the governments can't catch up with, or are too big for any one government to catch up with. Whether it's coordinating over climate change and geopolitics, or coordinating over like how do we make sure AI doesn't screw over like this school in this neighborhood of like West London. And this is where there's an opportunity to build technology that improves how human beings get stuff done communally. And so I think that's like the first thing I would say about what does trust infrastructure mean. It's a new vision. It's kind of like a network state vision. What are the coordination machines that we've used to
Mm,
date, and what are the coordination machines going to be in the future? I think the second thing trust infrastructure is about it's about reminding crypto people that often in life what matters is not creating completely trustless ways of interacting with each other, but actually making it easier for small groups to come together and spin
mm,
up and coordinate and then spin out again. So I think yeah, there's like a positive and a negative point as to like what trust infrastructure is. Yeah, I think it's a really compelling framing as to like where we're going. I'd say like with most of these things, whether it's like Ethereum as a credible commitments machine, or the world computer, or autonomous worlds, or trust infrastructure, or little internet. Like these things are all true in theory, and the great challenge of innovators is to see how they come true in practice. And so yeah, that's what I'm focused on with Tonk at the moment. So just like how does this get in touch with ground truth? How do we know if we're moving in the right direction? How do we know if we're moving in the wrong direction? And how fast can we figure that out? Yeah, innovation's really hard. I don't think it's supposed to be easy, but it's really fun and it's a privilege to be able to be creative with the atoms and bits that constitute our world.
beautiful. Let's finish this podcast with a call to action or anything you want to share.
You got my speech about why we shouldn't be scared and we should build on the great green plane of innovation. So you can cut and copy that bit. I think it'd be really great to communicate as clearly as I can how to get involved with Tonk. So the Tonk community is a Telegram group chat that has grown a lot over the last week and a half. And at some point, I'm gonna have to cap it because it's gonna spin like beyond Dunbar's number. And so there's an opportunity to just get in there now and get involved because there's really, really great people in there who you can coordinate with and get to know what we're building. And we respond to feedback on the tool like within like 24 hours. So, and not respond verbally, but respond like with code. So we're in that really exciting moment of product development where you can like be right in there and shape like what Tonk becomes as a tool. Tonk, the code, like you can use it today. There are two ways to use Tonk. So if you're someone who's building a new app, we have a CLI tool that will spin up new Tonk apps for you. It's a little bit like creating a Next app or a React app. If you already have an application that you want to make more private and more independent and more flexible and interoperable, then we've got a way of using a Tonk framework to manage all of your data and your state in your application lifecycle. This will massively improve your dev velocity as well, because it turns out that using Tonk to manage your state removes all the problems to do with caching and migrations and auth that you're used to from like traditional development. So Yes, take a look at the Tonk library on GitHub. Use it to build stuff. We're going to be running hackathons. We're going to be running events in the next few weeks. Like a lot of like ways to plug into the ecosystem. If you have any feedback, I have an open thing on the website where you can book a meeting directly with me. So we'll see how long that stays up. There you go. Yeah, so get involved. I think it's such an exciting time in the world to build and to build cool stuff.
Beautiful, beautiful conclusion. Thank you so much
There
for
you
coming
go.
to the show. It
Yeah,
was a
my
pleasure.
pleasure. And let me
Okay.
just say big love to Hyli for all of the great work they've been doing, both pushing the frontier of the technology and questioning like what even is a blockchain in the first place and how do we access global state in a way that's really powerful, but also the narrative work that Hyli's doing to bring decentralization to the rest of the world and for helping us understand what all of this is even about in the first place. So yeah, big love to Hyli.
Doing our best. Thank
There
you
you
very
go.
much.